60 minutes before every game, we get you ready for tip. It's Warriors Live, and it starts now.
Yes, it does. Warriors Live here on 95.7 The Game. Mark Randy with you for the next half hour as we get you ready for Warriors and the Toronto Raptors from Chase Center. Tip-off coming up in an hour, 5:30. Again, from Chase Center as the Warriors play host to the Toronto Raptors as the homestand continues for the Golden State Warriors. A 7-game homestand. This is game number 6 of the homestand. The Warriors through 5 games are 2-3. A win today and then a win to close out the homestand, and you can finish the homestand above 500, and you can go out onto the road also above 500. But the test tonight for the Golden State Warriors is the Toronto Raptors. We'll dive into all of that coming up here on Warriors Live, presented by Xfinity, the Xfinity 10G network made for streaming live sports. Mark Randy with you here on 95.7 The Game. Again, we're about an hour away from tip-off. I've got you covered up until 5 o'clock, and then Tim Roy will take over live from Chase Center, as always, here on 95.7 The Game. Let's begin on Warriors Live, as we always do, with the injury report. And there aren't there's some injuries that we got to get to, but the big one for the Golden State Warriors, of course, is Draymond Green. Not injury-related, but still will not play tonight, despite the fact that he is no longer being suspended by the NBA. We'll get into that in just a second, but first, today's injury report is brought to you by Boxer & Gerson, Northern California's premier workers' compensation law firm, helping injured workers get their lives back for over 40 years. For more information, visit boxerlaw.com. Again, as I said just a little bit ago, Draymond Green is still officially out today, but he's no longer suspended by the NBA. That suspension ended on Saturday. I'm sure most of you out there have heard the news already. He missed 12 games due to his suspension, and he's no longer suspended. He was reinstated on Saturday and has returned to the Warriors facility today. He's expected to need about a week to ramp up before he returns to play. So he's officially listed as out today with, quote, return to competition reconditioning. So Draymond Green no longer suspended, but he is still out today. He'll miss his 13th consecutive game, but this game is not due to his suspension. He's not being suspended for a 13th game. He missed 12 games due to suspension, and however many more games he misses before he does return, 2 or 3 games it seems like most likely, that'll be due to return to competition reconditioning, as the Warriors just call more generally ramp up. He's ramping up and getting ready to return to the court for the Golden State Warriors. So Draymond Green is out. If you missed the NBA statement on Draymond Green from Saturday, here it is for you. Quote from the NBA: Green completed steps that demonstrated his commitment to conforming his conduct to standards expected of NBA players. He has engaged in meetings with a counselor and has met jointly on multiple occasions with representatives of the NBA, the Warriors, and the National Basketball Players Association, both of which will continue throughout the season. So Draymond Green no longer suspended. The ball is no longer in the NBA's court. It is firmly in Draymond Green and the Warriors' court. The only thing stopping Draymond Green from a return to the court at this moment is his conditioning and his ability, physical ability to play in an NBA game. Certain we'll get more updates on that this week, and we'll keep you up to date, of course, here on 95.7 The Game. Now, the big injury for the Golden State Warriors, which was suffered on Friday night, is Chris Paul, the Warriors' reserve backup point guard who has been in the starting lineup a little bit recently. He is out with a left hand fracture that he suffered on Friday against Detroit. He will undergo surgery at some point this week and is expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks. That's according to Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN. Notable there, the trade deadline is February 8th, so a little more than a month away. And it kind of fits in that 4 to 6 week timeline for Chris Paul. And of course, the Warriors have a decision to make before the deadline comes, and Chris Paul could very well be involved in that. This maybe makes a trade of Chris Paul a little bit more difficult. But even if the Warriors do trade Chris Paul, he's likely going to be a buyout candidate on whichever team does acquire him. So it's not as if the acquiring team would likely be all that worried about his physical status. The All-Star break, also a note for Chris Paul, the All-Star break starts in 5 weeks, and the All-Star break is 8 days long. So if Chris Paul's absence lasts beyond 5 weeks, maybe to the more extreme of that range that Woj laid out, 4 to 6 weeks absence, he's not going to miss as many games as maybe you might think with an 8-day All-Star break mixed in there, where the Warriors or whichever team Chris Paul plays for at that point, not playing any games, of course. Also for the Golden State Warriors, on the injury report brought to you by Boxer and Gerson, Gary Payton II is out still with that hamstring strain he suffered on Tuesday of last week against Orlando. Remember, he returned for 2 games, played about 20 minutes, and then got injured again. He still remains out for the Golden State Warriors. When they initially provided an update, the Warriors, that is, they said Gary Payton II will be reevaluated in 3 weeks. So about 2.5 more weeks until a new reevaluation for Gary Payton II for the Golden State Warriors. But he's out along with Draymond Green and Chris Paul. Jonathan Kuminga, also on the injury report today, had been listed as questionable with a left toe strain all day, but he is available and will play today for the Golden State Warriors. If you remember, he also showed up on the injury report on Friday, but he played over 35 minutes. So he's good to go. Jonathan Kuminga will play tonight for the Golden State Warriors. Relatively quick injury report for the Toronto Raptors. Otto Porter Jr., a familiar name and face there. OPJ is out with a right knee sprain. Of course, Otto Porter Jr. was on the roster and was a key piece of the Warriors championship team in 2022. OPJ has missed the last 3 games for Toronto and has played in just 15 games this season. And Gary Trent Jr. is questionable, last I checked, for the Toronto Raptors. We'll get you up-to-the-date information on that before we do sign off. But Otto Porter Jr. is out. Gary Trent Jr. for the Raptors, questionable with a left quad contusion. And that is your injury report brought to you by Boxer and Gerson. All right, so with that injury report in mind, the Golden State Warriors are going to have to make a change to their starting lineup. And that brings me to my next point, and that is what's on tap. What's on Tap is brought to you by Farmers Brewing. Have you tried Farmers Brewing yet? If not, it's time to put your lips on a farmer. And as I just said, What's on Tap is a new Warriors starting lineup. Maybe it's one we've already seen so far this season, but it will not be the starting lineup we saw last time out for the Golden State Warriors. Of course, that starting lineup was Stephen Curry, Chris Paul, Klay Thompson, Jonathan Kuminga, and most recently, Kevon Looney. We had seen Trace Jackson-Davis for a couple of games get the start, but most recently it has been Kevon Looney. But again, without Chris Paul, how does the starting lineup change tonight for the Golden State Warriors? I think the most likely outcome and the most likely decision to be made by Steve Kerr is Brandon Podziemski back into the starting lineup instead of Chris Paul. But we also know without Chris Paul, Brandon Podziemski is now basically the Warriors' backup point guard. And does Steve Kerr want to try to stagger Steph Curry and Brandon Podziemski a little bit more? Maybe this clears the way for Moses Moody to earn a start or two for the Golden State Warriors until Draymond Green returns, and that might change up everything because Draymond Green at times kind of acts as the Warriors' point guard in the first place. So I think there's a couple of possibilities for the Golden State Warriors tonight. Brandon Podziemski, most likely, in my opinion, but I would not rule out a Moses Moody start. We will see if that does happen tonight for the Golden State Warriors. For a little bit more on this about the potential rotation changes, starting lineup changes for the Golden State Warriors, here is Steve Kerr post-game on Friday when he was asked about how the Chris Paul injury affects his rotations. Here's the Warriors head coach.
Yeah, both Brandon and Corey will play more at the point, and probably brings Moses also back into the rotation because you're replacing 30 minutes from Chris. So we won't replace all those minutes with one guy. We'll probably spread them out. But I'm excited to get Moses back out there. I thought he was great tonight. He brought a lot of energy. Great to hear the fans chanting his name. You know, he's a fan favorite for a reason. He plays hard, and being out of the loop the last few games has been tough on him, but he always stays ready. So I'm excited to get him back in there.
That's Steve Kerr post-game on Friday, and Perfect timing here as I'm getting through what's on tap, which is a new starting lineup for the Golden State Warriors. We've got some breaking news here on Warriors Live, courtesy of Anthony Slater of The Athletic. The Warriors have a new starting lineup. It features Jonathan Kuminga and Andrew Wiggins together. It'll be Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, Jonathan Kuminga, and Trace Jackson Davis. How about that? How about that for the Golden State Warriors? Again, the starting lineup for the Golden State Warriors tonight against the Toronto Raptors: Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, Jonathan Kuminga, and Trace Jackson Davis. It's interesting because the combination, the two-man combination of Jonathan Kuminga and Andrew Wiggins this season have not done all that well. Steve Kerr has called those two redundant. They kind of do the same things. Their weaknesses are each other's weaknesses, right? And their strengths are each other's strengths. So they kind of they highlight the good of each other, but you kind of also are more likely to see the bad and what those two aren't able to do on a consistent basis. But Steve Kerr rolling dice a little bit here. I will say that two-man combination, Kuminga and Andrew Wiggins, I think there were like a +6 in 7 minutes on Friday night. So small sample there, but it looked a little bit better on Friday, and maybe that was the encouragement that Steve Kerr needed to make this change here tonight. So again, if you're just joining us, a new Golden State Warriors starting lineup tonight, it is Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, Jonathan Kuminga, and Trace Jackson Davis. So to put a bow on what's on tap, again, brought to you by Farmers Brewing, a brand new Golden State Warriors starting lineup tonight as the Warriors get ready to take on the Toronto Raptors. All right, let's keep going here on Warriors Live on 95.7 The Game. An interesting storyline in this matchup is the Toronto Raptors are in kind of a little bit of a fire sale as they approach the NBA trade deadline. They come in at 14-21 on the season, and they're a very poor road team. They're 5-12 away from Toronto so far this season. Of course, most recently at the very tail end of 2023, on the 29th, they made a trade. They made a trade, and they sent away OG Anunoby and a couple of others to the New York Knicks. They got back Emmanuel Quickley to go with R.J. Barrett, and they have been very heavily involved in rumors for another one of their key players, Pascal Siakam, who's averaging over 22 points per game, over 6 rebounds per game, 5 assists per game. He's in the final year of his contract, and one of those teams that has been rumored to be interested in Pascal Siakam, the Golden State Warriors. So keep an eye on Pascal Siakam tonight, and obviously Toronto will be keeping an eye on a couple of key players for the Golden State Warriors. It seems like Toronto, and I don't know this for a fact, don't have any sources here, but it seems like Toronto would most likely be interested in Jonathan Kuminga. He seems to be the Warriors' most valuable young piece that matches up with Toronto's core, and that core is led by Scotty Barnes, who is just an incredible young talent, averages 21 points, about 9 rebounds and 6 assists a game. He is phenomenal. Rookie of the year from a couple of seasons ago. He's a great player for the Toronto Raptors. They just acquired a couple of other younger players, again in R.J. Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley. And Emmanuel Quickley is playing really good basketball in 3 games with the Toronto Raptors. He's averaging 20 points. He's shooting 44% from downtown in 3 games as a Raptor. By the way, Quickley's 11 three-point field goals are the most by a player in a 3-game span to start their Raptors career. So a very good start to the career for Emmanuel Quickley. But I say all of that just to say that the Raptors are interested in getting younger because their core, which is a very promising core led by Scotty Barnes, they're young and they're up and coming, so they would likely be interested, my guess, in Jonathan Kuminga. However, yesterday, Michael Grange, a Raptors reporter and insider, reported that the Warriors would not want to part with Jonathan Kuminga in a deal that would send, potentially, Pascal Siakam to the Golden State Warriors. However, he did also say that Moses Moody would maybe fit the Raptors lineup and their roster and their identity a little bit better than Jonathan Kuminga going forward. As Grange wrote, quote, Moses Moody would be a more seamless positional fit alongside Barnes and newly young starters Emmanuel Quickley, along with the aforementioned R.J. Barrett. And Barnes happened to play high school basketball with Moses Moody as well. So just another interesting storyline to throw into this game. It is a potential trade that might go down between these two teams over the next month. The Warriors certainly interested in a player like Pascal Siakam, and the Raptors would be interested in some of the Warriors' young pieces. Now, important to note that likely Chris Paul would need to be involved in any deal to make the salaries match for the Golden State Warriors here today. All right, let's move on here on Warriors Live. Let's get to our Take It to the Bank prediction, brought to you by Fremont Bank. Full service banking, no compromises. I think we're going to get some more nail-biting moments tonight, and that's not really me going out on a limb, because the Golden State Warriors have played an NBA-high 28 games this season that include clutch time, which is defined as a game in which the margin is within 5 points in the final 5 minutes of regulation or overtime. 19 of the Warriors' last 22 games have been clutch, including the last 4. And also for the Toronto Raptors, their last 5 games have all been decided by 5 or fewer points. So the Toronto Raptors recently playing nothing but clutch basketball games as well. But in the Warriors' 28 clutch time games this season, they're 14-14. They picked up a win last time out against the Detroit Pistons, a team that only has 3 wins on the year. Not the best sign that the Warriors needed to eke one out in clutch time against that team, but they earned their win. They're now 14-14 in clutch time games this season. And by the way, if you're curious, the Golden State franchise record for most clutch games in a season, 50 for the Warriors. That was in the 05-06 season. The NBA record is 57 by the Knicks in 02-03. And the Warriors, again, have 28 clutch games in 35 games played so far this season. It means they are well on pace to blow the franchise and NBA regular season records out of the water. If the Warriors keep up the pace they're currently on in terms of playing clutch games, they'd play 65 clutch games this season, which is 8 more than the current NBA record, according to Elias Sports Bureau. So the Golden State Warriors, really not going out on a limb, but my Take It to the Bank prediction is we get more clutch time minutes tonight for the Golden State Warriors against the Toronto Raptors. So the Warriors come into this game, as we talked about, winners last time out. They're 17-18, 11-9 at home. Toronto sitting at 14-21, 5-12 on the road. However, Toronto playing a little bit better of late ever since they did make that deal that sent OG Anunoby to the New York Knicks. They acquired R.J. Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley, a couple of young, promising players. And Emmanuel Quickley, as I said, playing really well right now for Toronto. They are 2-1. Their only loss last time out on Friday in Sacramento. It was a crazy game, 135-130. Sacramento earned the win, but Toronto was right there with the Raptors. They also have wins over Cleveland on New Year's Day back on Monday, 6 days ago. A really tight win by 3 points, and then they went to Memphis and won. I know Memphis's record isn't particularly threatening or impressive right now, but ever since the Grizzlies got Ja Morant back, they have been playing much better basketball. So a couple of impressive wins for Toronto and a hard-fought loss against a quality team on the road in Sacramento. I say all that to say that this Raptors team, I wouldn't overlook them just because they're 14-21, and the Warriors are in no position to do that either. I mean, they just went wire to wire against a team that has only 3 wins on the season in the Detroit Pistons last time out on Friday. So the Warriors need to stay focused as they prepare for the Toronto Raptors here tonight. But again, if you're just joining us here on Warriors Live, Mark Randy with you for about 5 more minutes. The Warriors are going to a new starting lineup tonight. Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, Jonathan Kuminga, and Trayce Jackson-Davis. This, of course, this decision by Steve Kerr, spurned by Chris Paul's broken left hand, fractured left hand. As a result, Steve Kerr needed to change up the starting lineup. I thought it was possible we see Brandon Pajemski inserted. I thought it was possible we see Moses Moody inserted. Instead, it's Andrew Wiggins back into the starting lineup. The Warriors get a little bit bigger. They also put Trace Jackson-Davis back in the starting lineup. Kevon Looney moves back to the bench. And as we try to sort through this decision by Steve Kerr, I was kind of talking about it a little bit earlier before we got this news. You can kind of understand why, because the Warriors now, without Chris Paul, you got Steph Curry as your primary ball handler when he's on the floor, obviously. You have no Chris Paul. You have no Draymond Green. Draymond Green, despite the fact that he's a power forward or a center, however you want to look at him, he's the Warriors' primary ball handler oftentimes, the initiator of the offense, if you will, when he's on the court. Without Chris Paul and without Draymond Green, you're kind of at a loss for ball handlers. So it seems like Steve Kerr, unwilling to make Corey Joseph, the backup point guard, is going to perhaps stagger Steph Curry and Brandon Pajemski a little bit moving forward. Brandon Pajemski now has an even bigger and more important role, and he's succeeded at everything that he's done so far this season. I mean, you just look at some of the things that he has done. Pajemski is tied for third among all players this season in charges drawn. He's 10th in three-point field goal percentage. Among rookies, he's second in three-point percentage. He's fourth in assists per game, fifth in rebounding. And he's the only player in the top 5 of those categories this season. He's 8th in scoring and 4th in steals per game among all rookies. So he's been really good. But this is kind of a new challenge now for Brandon Pajemski as the Golden State Warriors look to him to be a little bit more of a primary ball handler and to unlock Stephen Curry a little bit and to relieve some of the pressure and some of the stress from Steph Curry. If you think back to when Steve Kerr made his most recent lineup change before tonight, that was taking Pajemski out of the starting lineup and putting Chris Paul in the starting lineup. Why did Steve Kerr make that change? Because he wanted to unlock Steph Curry off the ball a little bit more. And to do that, you need an elite ball handler, and who better to do that than Chris Paul? Allow Chris Paul to set up the offense, to initiate the offense, to get the Warriors in their sets and their plays, and then you have Steph Curry off the ball, and you trust Chris Paul to get him the ball. Well, now you have a couple of adjustments for the Golden State Warriors. One, you no longer have that other number 2 ball handler to start games with Stephen Curry. And now you also don't have Chris Paul to turn to lead the second unit. So how is Brandon Pajemski going to make that work for the Golden State Warriors? It's going to be really interesting to see. I would imagine Brandon Pajemski will be one of, if not the first men off the bench for the Golden State Warriors. It would be him and Kevon Looney to come in for Trace Jackson-Davis, who's also back in the starting lineup. And it seems like Steve Kerr might be making this change with the Draymond Green return in mind. Again, if you're just joining us, Draymond Green has been reinstated, not playing tonight. He's no longer suspended. He's got to ramp up and get his body physically ready and reconditioned to play. When Draymond Green does return, what does the starting lineup look like? Maybe this is a little bit of a preview for the Golden State Warriors tonight. I've said for a long time here on 95.7 The Game, I don't think Draymond Green and Kevon Looney can coexist on the floor together. We will see about that. All right, that'll do it here for Warriors Live here on 95.7 The Game, presented by the Xfinity 10G Network, the best way to stream live sports. I'll be back with you for Warriors wrap-up after the game, but for now, we'll get you out to Tim Roy and Company at Chase Center. This has been Warriors Live. Thank you so much for tuning in. Warriors and Raptors coming up next, right here on 95.7 The Game.
Come into Friedman's Appliance in Pleasant Hill and see an amazing selection of Sub-Zero, Wolf, and Cove appliances live and on display in one of the largest living kitchens